Bonjour, welcome to Comme in Française. Today I'm very, very glad to welcome Christina. Christina is an English teacher, but I invited her today because she's been here for
14 years now.
14 years in France. She speaks fantastic French, almost perfect.
Thank you.
And I wanted her to share about her experience living here in France, like a big immersion for 14 years. Speaking the language, learning about culture. So this is what we're going to talk about in this episode. So welcome, Christina. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
In the studio?
In the studio, right, yeah.
Could you please tell us a bit about yourself?
Sure. So I am originally from a little town called Pascagoula, Mississippi, on the coast of the Gulf of Mexico. But I came to France when I was a student doing my bachelor's degree. So originally for a one-year study abroad program in Orléans, which is near Paris. It's a lovely little city. And I went back to the U.S. to finish my bachelor's, wanted to go back and stay in France a little more, so I decided to sign up for a master's degree here in Grenoble. I met my husband, and I've been here ever since.
That's fantastic, because you've learned French at a high level, even before coming here.
Sort of, yeah. So I studied French in high school, and then I did a bachelor's degree in French.
Okay. How good does that make you in French?
You know, I don't know, because I had good teachers, so I'm not criticizing the teachers because they were fantastic teachers. But it's just that when you're learning, and especially this was kind of before we had the internet access to everything like we do today. You know, I was learning French in a place where no one speaks French, where you have no opportunity to use it, and your only resources are basically your textbooks and the CDs. Well, yeah, it was CDs at that time, the CDs that go with them. So you can get, I guess, good at having this kind of school French, but to become really fluent in the sense of able to just talk about whatever, I was pretty far from that, yeah.
You mentioned that your teachers were fantastic, which I have no doubt about. Can you tell us about the kind of French that you learned at school and how different it was from when you arrived? Because I assume it was a bit different.
It was a bit different, yeah. And I've when I arrived, I always thought that it would have been so useful if when people spoke, they had like comic book speech bubbles so I could see what they were saying. Of course, they don't. But so, yeah, there was that difference. Like, I was really good at French in school. Like, I was one of the best students in the class, and I really liked it. So I would do it outside of class because I just enjoyed it. But there was still a huge difference between being the best in the class in your university classes and arriving in France and talking to real people. And I remember feeling like, I don't understand any of this. How am I going to survive a year? But in the end, it was okay.
What did it mean in terms of French learning to be the best of your class? What did you learn?
Let's see. What were some of the things? The things that I remember that stick out in my mind. From high school, we learned a lot of grammar. So
an example?
Like est-ce que to make the questions.
Oh no.
Yeah, like est-ce que tu veux prendre un café? Est-ce qu'on y va?
That's a bit passive aggressive.
Okay, all right. So we learned it was to make questions. And I remember that the teacher would have these transparencies, because that's the technology we had at the time, and would put the grammar projected up onto the wall, and we would copy the grammar rules into our grammar notebook. Like we had a specific notebook for it. And it was very useful, I think, to really understand the grammar of the structure of the language and how it worked. Not the most interesting thing to learn, but it was good to have like the bricks, the foundations of the language. And in university, we learned, university was perhaps more interesting because we continued learning the language itself. But we also did a lot more culture. Like we read Petit Nicolas et ses copains, when you're 20 years old and you're reading a book for 5-year-old French kids. But it was
very good.
But it's very good. And for our level, it was what we needed. We would listen to music like MC Solar and Zebda to learn the language, but also like what is he talking about in French culture and French society. And we learned these kinds of things, and it was really interesting.
That's pretty good.
Yeah.
I always smile at textbook grammar because it has a completely different meaning in the everyday French.
Right, yeah.
And very often I have to teach the students to learn it.
Right.
But not to say it's not good. It's just something that is not used, and you have to learn how it's used.
Yeah, exactly. Right.
We talked about the inversion, I think, some time ago.
Inversion, yeah. We also learned this whole thing of inversion, like veux-tu ou allez-vous.
No.
Ou instead of saying qu'est-ce que nous allons faire, you would say qu'allons-nous faire, which nobody says.
We say on fait quoi?
Yeah, on fait quoi. And that was another thing that we had a really hard time understanding was on. Because the teacher, she's like, oh, well, it's kind of like one in English, but nobody says ever like, oh, one does this. It sounds a little strange. And so we had a really time understand, like in class, I couldn't understand how often and how important it was to understand how to use on until you come to France and you realize everybody uses it everywhere. And you just have to learn how to use it, because if you say things like, qu'allons-nous faire, people are like, what century are you from? Even though it is correct French, but nobody says it.
Yeah. I'm glad that you learned grammar first.
Yeah.
As well, because understanding the grammar is very important. It's not something I talk about much in my premium classes. We do like popular culture, everyday French, and to get you from your textbook to your more normal French.
Right, yeah.
But understanding the grammar, it's important because it will help you structure your French.
Exactly.
But indeed, as you said, qu'allons-nous faire you sound like
this old bourgeois
like
lady or something. Yeah.
And est-ce que tu veux du café? May, I'm not saying all the time because it's not, but may sound a bit passive-aggressive because you're implying a very yes-no question. As in, tu veux du café is roughly the same answer, but it's more everyday French, so you're not like putting them in a corner.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's like an offer.
Yeah, so if you're talking to someone, you're your same level, so not your boss or not someone you have to be very polite to.
Yeah, exactly.
Just be wary of your French, because if you're too polite, it will sound either you're making fun of them or it's a bit passive-aggressive. You will be forgiven because you're foreigner.
Right.
But if you want to sound like equals, just learn the way that we speak.
Exactly. And I would say maybe listen to the way people speak to you.
Yes.
And then of course, it's not an immediate, like, oh, he said this, I will say that. But just kind of listen and notice and progressively try to, use the same structures or the same expressions that the other people around you are using. And then you're going to sound like the people around you. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's what I do in English.
Yeah, right.
For the end of the emails, I always copy what the people told me.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, if they say best regards, I say best regards.
Right.
Because I never know how
is
to
it
use
right?
those.
Yeah. And just listen and copy what the people around you are doing.
I can't believe you were sent to France without knowing on.
Well, we had studied it, but there's a big difference between studying and understanding or using.
That's super. It's not even super important. It's like...
It's a basic.
It's
like we and no.
Absolutely. And did you know about dropping the ne?
I don't know.
Like, on ne mange pas, on mange pas.
Yeah, I think I discovered that. Like, I'm sure our teachers probably told us about it. But again, there's always a big difference between learning it, sitting in a classroom, and discovering it. You're like, oh, yeah, what the teacher said was actually right. But discovering to the degree, like, to which it's done, like how frequent it is and how just like that's the way people talk all the time. Yeah. And I think we really, you notice it when you come and you listen to people and you're like, why did he say je sais pas instead of je ne sais pas?
What does that mean?
What is je sais pas? That doesn't make any sense. And you learn that that's just one of those things. It's not correct, but everybody does. And if you don't do it incorrectly like everybody else does, you sound a little like an outsider. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So.
That must have been a surprising. Yeah.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah, there was a lot of little things like that. Yeah, that you discover that that's the way. Like one example was with the word néanmoins, which means like nevertheless.
Yeah.
But nobody uses it in conversation. And I remember I was talking to one of my French friends when I was a student, and we were talking, I don't know, Friday night plans or something. I was like, bah néanmoins, da 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 da. And he was like,
who are you?
Yeah, like, I think he was like, don't say that. And first I thought I had said something bad.
Yeah.
And then I was like, no, but I know néanmoins, it's nevertheless. And he's like, no, we would say something like mais, da da da, something much simpler.
Yeah.
So there's those little things as well. Yeah.
But I think this is a very big mistake we make at school. I remember we had to write some essays in English, and we had to use connecteur logique.
Yeah. How you like connector words.
Yeah, like, and these kind of néanmoins things, and you would earn points for using them.
Right.
But then you arrive I used to live in the UK, and you arrive there at the pub or whatever, and no one ever uses
No one says, like, moreover, we can also go see a movie. And you're like, what?
Absolutely. Yeah. So it's something that I don't like from school, is that you learn things that are actively not used. Like, you're 100% positive they're not going to be used, unless you're going to write essays for scientific papers.
Right, yeah.
But for everyday life, it was a huge, not going to say disappointment, but I figured out that what I had learned at school wouldn't be very useful.
Wasn't the most useful thing for everyday life.
But now, because of YouTube and all the online stuff, you can get proper material to compare what you learned to what's actually said.
Yeah, exactly. Like I said, when I was learning, if we wanted to have any kind of access to like popular culture, it was maybe the CD that was with our textbook, which had some songs by popular groups or things like that. But now you can just go onto YouTube and you can find TV shows or maybe movies or extracts of movies, or movies are easy to find. But you can have a lot more access to the same stuff that French people are watching. And so that you can really, I would say, maybe be in sync with, their culture like they are. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And talking about culture, you studied French at school, then you came here for a master's, and then you met your husband, and you stayed.
Right.
I'm always impressed by how much popular culture you've learned and you know. Well, I know your husband, he's very much into popular culture, so I completely trust him into teaching you that. How did you learn the popular culture? Like, not the history books things, but like things that I know from my teenage years. You were not here. So how do you have a strategy? Do you have tips for the audience on how you get that? Because no one teaches that. Well, I do a bit, but...
Yeah, sure. I would say there's maybe kind of two ways of getting it. And the first one is if you're lucky enough to have some French friends, they'll probably share it with you.
How?
Well, I remember when I was a student, like they would literally just show me sketches from Jamel Debbouze saying, this is and that was 10 years ago. So he was not as popular as today, but he was still very popular and everyone knew him. And they were like, he's he's a comedian. Watch the sketch, and I wouldn't understand it, of course, and they would explain it to me. So I was very lucky to have French friends who enjoyed sharing their culture with foreigners. And so they would show me sketches from Les Inconnus and Les Nuls, Les Bronzés font du ski, and they would show it to me and then explain like how it was important or why it was important. And not like, this is important because it represents French society. No. They're just like,
it's fun.
Yeah, they're like, this is fun and everybody knows it. When you hear someone say something like, on va prendre un vin chaud, it's because of this film.
Les Bronzés font du ski.
Yeah, exactly. And so I was lucky in that sense to have friends who, like served it to me on a plate.
They were active.
Yeah, exactly. Because they were, they liked having friends who came from other cultures and sharing their culture with the foreigners.
But how do you get what you don't get?
I think that comes from just being attentive and curious about things. For example, like Johnny Hallyday.
Yes.
Not a fan of him. And maybe it was until I met Roman, because Roman does like Johnny Hallyday.
And Roman is your
husband. Yes, sorry. Roman is my husband. He's my French husband. And so for the time when I was in France, I probably had heard the name of Johnny Hallyday, maybe, but I didn't pay any attention to it because I'm not a fan of his music and his style.
And it's not your generation either.
And it's not my generation. So I didn't grow up with this. So I don't have this emotional connection that all French people do. And so, when I met Roman and he would listen to it and I was like, what are you listening? I was like, wait, that's an American song, because Johnny does a lot of French versions, or used to do, because he's passed away now.
No, because it was something that they were doing in the 60s.
Yeah, exactly. And something I learned was when he passed away recently, and they were saying that he really helped to introduce American culture to French people, because he took a lot of American, rock songs and redid them and gave them French lyrics so that it could be accessible to the average French person. But me, I was listening to this music and I was like, that's a cover. That's somebody else already did that. All he does is copy American songs. And my husband's like, no, it's Johnny. You have to. And so I would learn that he was like, what they say, the French Elvis, and that he had a huge place in French culture, as, many people saw with his funeral, which was a massive event. But it was something that before I met my husband and just discovered it through his tastes, that I probably, would have passed, just not even noticing. So, yeah. But I would say it's, being curious and keeping your eyes open, and if you see something and maybe you see this person on the cover of a magazine on 3 different magazines.
It's a good idea.
And you're like, okay, maybe I should know who this is. Maybe buy one of the magazines, even if, if it's like a Hollywood celebrity gossip magazine, it's not your thing.
They're not as worse as the one in the US and the UK.
Yeah, right? Just get it and flip through the pages, and, maybe the language is not going to be too complex, and so it's accessible, and just try to learn a little bit, and then you can ask people about it, because if you don't know what to ask about, then that's when it's more difficult.
And the idea of magazines is a great tip. It could be a rule of thumb. If you see people 3 times, maybe you should know who they are.
Maybe you should know who that person is. Buy one of those magazines and try to figure it out, or Google it or something.
You talked about also TV shows.
Yeah.
Because they're more, they come every day. So
right.
if someone is invited, it means that they're kind of important today.
Yeah, right.
Can you tell us more about that and what kind of advice you have for the audience?
Yeah, sure. I would say, one TV show that we watch very often, it's Le Quotidien with Jan Barthez. And it's Jan Barthez is the host, and he invites different people from, musicians to athletes to actors, everyone, right. Invites them onto the show, and they generally talk about their work and what they're doing. And so it's a really good way to discover, the same people that French people are discovering, if it's a new singer or something, but also to learn more about these, people of French pop culture that everybody knows about, like Eddie Mitchell, for example, who is another singer from like the Johnny Hallyday generation.
Absolutely.
Which again, I'm not a fan. I don't like his music. I think you can't understand what he says because he sings. He's like, roar, 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 roar. But it's nice to just kind of know what's happening. And if you don't know this person already, it's a chance to discover. And then you can go and, explore on your own on the internet and learn more. Yeah.
That's a great idea. I never thought about that. Because you don't have to do it for everyone you see on the program. It's just like if you connect with one of them, or if you see them coming back.
Yeah.
maybe they're important, maybe something's happening.
Right, exactly. And you can also kind of tell, like, for example, Eddie Mitchell or something, who is a very, established in French pop culture. You can kind of tell by, like, audience reaction if they're very loud and applauding a lot. It means this person's probably kind of important. And you can maybe just look him up on the internet and see, who is this person, or is he just some new singer who's going to be here today and gone tomorrow, or has he been having this career for 40 years? Yeah.
Yeah, and on TV, especially for singers, if there's a special about them, maybe they're kind of important.
Yeah, or maybe they're going to die.
Or both.
We always have this joke because there's a lot of Michel Sardou shows, documentaries on at the moment.
And your husband is a huge
And my husband
fan.
loves Michel Sardou. And I hate Michel Sardou, but, everybody has their own tastes. And we have this joke because he's on all these shows now, and there's documentaries about his life, and Roman's like, he's kind of maybe the next one to go. I don't know. But, you can see that, and you see he's on lots of different channels, that maybe you don't have to like him, but it's good to know who he is. Yeah.
Yeah, because if someone mentions him, at least you know who that is.
Yeah, you know who it is. Even if you don't know a lot about them, at least you identify them. Yeah.
We talked about how your friend has helped you. Mm-hmm. How has your husband helped you? Because I usually tell my students, don't ask your partner to teach you French.
Right.
Because you're adding too much weight on your relationship already, which is going to be, I'm not going to say complicated, but it has specific challenges because it's a bicultural couple. Right. So just be aware that there will be cultural differences. So just don't add the French thing to it. Mm-hmm. But some couples teach the language to each other, which is fantastic, but not all. How has Romain helped you learn French and learn the French culture as well? What do you do? What do you ask?
Yeah, I think probably what's the most useful about having a partner who is, let's say, a part of the culture in which you're living. So, like, I'm not French, but I live in France. So I'm living in French culture, and my husband is French. Is when you're watching TV or reading something or listening, and there's something that you don't understand, it's like an instant dictionary. I'm like, hey, what does this mean? Right. Like a good example is with when Kate and William got married. And so there was this word in the news very often, roturière. And, like, I had never heard this word even after 10 years or so of living in France. And I was like, what does this mean? I just asked him. I was like, ça veut dire quoi, roturière? And he's like, oh, it means someone who is not of the royal, like a common person, not of the royal family.
We are.
Yeah, like we are roturières, yes. And, and like it's very helpful to know that. Or another example is an expression. There was the debate between Macron and Marine Le Pen, and Macron came out with this expression, poudre de perlimpinpin. And a lot of French people made fun of him for it. I didn't know what it meant, and I don't think I had ever heard the expression, and I didn't catch the expression. I was like, poudre de what? Because it sounds very funny. Poudre de perlimpinpin. It doesn't sound like an official, like, political expression. So I just asked him, I was like, what does this mean? And he just explained it to me. And that it's like, when you want to kind of divert someone's attention or hide something from them, and it's kind of a little trickery or something like that. So that's very helpful.
Yeah. And it's impressive that you caught the word. Because sometimes we don't understand, but it's too late and you didn't get the word.
You don't catch it. Yeah, exactly. In that case, I just say, like, what was the thing that he said about that something? And then my husband's like, what are you talking about? And I was like, he said, I don't know, jeté de something or other. And then he's like, yeah, poudre de perlimpinpin. So you can do it that way. Just describe the thing that you missed. Yeah.
You're lucky because for this specific example, it made the news the next day.
Right. Yeah. Because everyone was like, what is he talking about?
Emmanuel Macron is very highly educated and has a very wide vocabulary. So sometimes he comes out with very old-fashioned expressions. They're not bad expressions or anything. They're just very literary.
Yeah, and it's kind of funny when they use,
So sometimes people are surprised because he uses this kind of words. So it will come up over and over because he cannot help himself he
can't stop himself using it.
Yes.
Right.
Even, my English is not as good. Using them, so they will come up over again and again and again, and they often make the news.
Yeah. And then that's a great opportunity to learn those expressions. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because then the next day when they were all talking about it in the news, I was like, I know what they're talking about. Whereas the night before, I didn't until I asked my husband. Yeah. So.
You speak very, very good French.
Oh, thank you.
And you're still learning some things.
Yeah.
But French it's not very hard, but it can be hard, especially at the end of your learning. It's not me. I think Tim Ferriss said something the end is more difficult than just the beginning, and it will take you more time to learn the details.
Last bits, yeah.
Is there thing that you gave up on?
The thing I gave up on learning is masculine, feminine, because
you know a lot.
Well, like there's some words that I know are masculine, feminine. Like I know that's une boîte or une chaise. Those are fine. But then there's a lot of other words that, maybe I don't use all the time, like structure, which I never know if it's masculine or feminine. And I always ask my husband, and he says,
une.
Yeah, he's like une, like it was the last time I told you. And I'm like, but there are like some words, I don't know why, but they just they don't stick. Like
it's normal. It's too much to learn.
Yeah, or I don't know. It's just like he can tell me a million times, and I always say, remember, next time it's une structure. And the next time I ask, is it une structure? So there's some words that for some reason, they just don't stick in my brain, and I've just given up on trying to learn them. Either I will ask, is it masculine or feminine? Or most of the cases, I just throw it out in a conversation and figure they'll know which one I'm talking about. And if not, then they'll probably laugh at me. And then I'll find it funny as well, because I think it's very important to be able to laugh at yourself when you're learning a language, and to make jokes about yourself as well, just because it doesn't have to be so serious all the time. So I've given up on masculine, feminine, and that's okay.
Yeah, I always say that to students who are a bit stressed. Just relax. It's just learn language. It's learning a language, and it's just learning. We're not just learning a language. We're not curing cancer or saving someone's life.
Yeah.
Just fun. And you make not tons of mistakes, but you still make mistakes. And some of them will never disappear. I know that your use of C is completely random.
It's totally, maybe it's we, maybe it's C. Let's 50-50, and it's okay because people still understand, and it doesn't create confusion. Most people will be like, oh, it's so cute. And you're like, I don't want to be cute. I've been here for 14 years.
But they will always know you're a foreigner. Exactly. You cannot hide it.
Exactly. Because I still have an accent. And, generally about the third thing people say to me is, votre accent, il est vraiment charmant, mais c'est très léger. Your accent is very charming, but it's very light accent. And I'm like, no, it's not. You can hear it from 5 miles away. And that's okay, because they're trying to make a connection with you. They know that you're a foreigner. There's no point in trying to pretend that you're not. And just kind of embrace it. And when you make mistakes, you can just make a little joke and be like, oh, désolé, je suis américaine, je savais pas. Or I always am telling them en anglais c'est beaucoup plus simple, on n'a pas masculin féminin.
And it works.
Yeah, and people are like, oh yeah, and they're okay. They don't feel like you are massacring their language. And it's a light way of making a connection with someone as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah, it's okay. Just don't be afraid to laugh at yourself. And I would say, maybe don't get offended when people try to correct you, because it's coming from a good intention to help you improve your language. Whereas, in English, we might think that it's a little rude to correct someone. Well, if you can understand their English, but it's not always correct, then you just continue the conversation. You don't insist on they use the right preposition or something. You're like, oh, wait, no, not participate at the meeting. It's participate in the meeting. And you're like, you know what I meant. Whereas in French, they will correct you on these little tiny things, but it's not pedantic or condescending. It's to help you improve. So don't be offended when somebody corrects you. Just say like, merci, je savais pas. And get on with the conversation.
And you can forget
it. And you can forget it in 5 minutes because that is what generally happens, and it's okay.
Yeah. They usually don't have bad intentions. It might come out wrong.
Yeah.
Because you don't understand the situation, or maybe you're not in a very strong place yourself, or they're a bit rude. But 99% of the time, they have good intentions.
Yeah, exactly.
And just play with it. Just say, merci beaucoup, je ne savais pas, ou j'ai appris quelque chose aujourd'hui, anything like that. And then you can forget about it, and that's okay, because it was very probably a difficult thing. Just like prepositions, as you said, they're so hard to remember.
And there's no logic, generally. So just say thank you, and that's it.
And play with it.
Yeah, have fun.
And you learned a lot about popular culture. Is there things that you don't get? I know that humors and some popular culture reference are a bit hard. Is there a thing that you just know, but it's just
I'm like, there is this movie. It's called La Cité de la Peur.
Yes.
Which my husband finds absolutely funny.
I do.
And a lot of French people find absolutely funny. It's one of those kind of references that everybody has. And I remember the first time I watched it, like, either I didn't understand the humor, or because it's a difference in culture, so a difference in perception of what's funny. Like, I understood it, but I didn't think it was funny. And so this is a very funny French movie for a lot of French people. And I watched it, and I was like, the whole time just kind of like, I don't get it. Or like, Roman's laughing, and I'm just kind of waiting for the next scene to happen. And so now the joke is Roman, whenever he talks about this movie, he's like, La Cité de la Peur, tu sais ce film à Paris? This film that you didn't laugh at. And like, whenever we'll watch it again sometimes, and now I can appreciate it a bit more, maybe because I understand the jokes a little more, or I understand the humor that is there. But it's still like, even like today, it's an okay movie for me. But for a lot of French people, it's a really like funny classic. So, yeah.
It's a very hard one. I think, because you have to know the language of the years.
Right.
Like it was in the 90s or something.
Something like that, yeah.
You have to know all the references of Les Nuls, which were the comic groups who made it.
Right.
You have to know other things about Canal+, which was a huge popular culture thing in France.
Right.
So it's a lot. And the French.
Yeah. And there's a lot of plays on words as well.
Bad ones.
Yeah.
On purpose.
Yeah. I was like, there's one in my mind, the only one that I can think of, and I don't know if I should share it with your audience or not.
Go on.
Okay. It's the one where Gérard Darmon's character is serving a whiskey, and he's like, deux doigts, because deux doigts means like un doigt. Yeah, un doigt, which means just a little bit of whiskey. Yeah. And the woman says, not before dinner. And you're like, when you don't understand the humor and the pun, you're just like, I don't get it. And then when you do understand it, you're like, that's vulgar. And the French person is laughing hilariously at it. So it's all of this kind of offbeat humor, which when you understand, first of all, you may not understand. And when you do understand, you may not find it funny. So it's just a very, it's a good example of kind of a cultural difference thing. Yeah.
And this reference in particular might come up a lot.
Yeah.
In jokes, in apéro or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. When someone's serving you a drink and you're like, juste un doigt.
No.
And you're like, no. But that's a good point, that when you go to like dinners or apéros or, all these very social events with French people, these references are very common and like sprinkled in the conversation. And if you don't get them, you can feel a little lost, and then you kind of feel a little stupid or silly. But, you can ask them about it. Like, why was that funny?
Yeah,
and they'll explain it.
To tell
and they will love telling you about it. Yeah.
Absolutely, because conversation is at the heart of French culture.
Yeah.
It's not even just speaking, it's speaking well.
Right.
And this doesn't apply to knowing the gender of words.
Yeah.
This applies to being able to go back and forth, chit-chat with noise, with several people talking to each other at the same time. Right. So it will really unlock your French if you know all these popular cultures.
Exactly. Right.
Have you watched Le Père Noël est une ordure?
I've seen it, and I really don't like this movie.
Okay. But it's very important.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's one of the ones when I was a student, and my French friends, they wanted to show me because they're like, "Oh, this is the French Christmas movie. We have nice, happy, warm, Christmas movies, and this one's about I don't even remember what it's about, but it's just people yelling at each other all the time. And I didn't find it funny. So.
It's very special.
Yeah.
But you have to know it. You have to know Les Bronzés font du ski, all these kind of references that really will build your knowledge of the popular culture, which is not Victor Hugo and Émile Zola, but are things that people talk about.
Yeah, exactly. And the things that come up in conversations all the time. No one's making references to like Les Misérables or the Spleen de Paris or something like that. And I think even maybe sometimes when you try to make those references, which you think are like the high French classics, people are like, okay, you're just showing off now. So you have to understand the pop culture in order to be able to really understand and make connections with people.
A very good student of mine, she was following one of the premium programs, I think. Might have been subtle French for fitting in.
Yeah.
And she watched the movies.
Right.
And she understood that I was telling her, you can make these references to restaurant owners and kind of things. Right. And she tried.
Yeah.
And she made a fantastic connection. And I think some of them, she didn't even watch the movie, which I think was so funny. she could make the reference, but not knowing the movie.
Right, yeah. And I think it's the little things like that. Because also then they're more impressed when you know those than if you know Victor Hugo.
Absolutely.
Because, everybody knows Victor Hugo because he's famous and a giant French literary figure. So they kind of expect you to have some knowledge of that already. But if you know something from like Les Bronzés font du ski and you're not French, they're like, how do you know that? So that can impress them as well, yeah.
I'm imagining you watching Les Bronzés font du ski. That's...
Oh, yeah. No, we watch it like every year when we come back from skiing, generally.
Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, Geraldine.
Do you have any other kind of tips for people learning French, trying to learn the culture?
I would say maybe the other than just have fun with it and don't be afraid of making mistakes. Just be very curious and go out and try to learn things. And even if it's something that is not necessarily your style or your taste, you don't have to like it, but you can always learn something from it. So, maybe don't be, maybe in your native language, you really hate celebrity gossip magazines. You think they're trashy and horrible. But, don't be afraid maybe to pick one up and just flip through the pages and kind of get an overview of the popular culture, because that's going to help you to then know what to ask about and to make those connections and to learn more about the language and the culture.
And you can ask your friend, who's that?
Yeah, exactly. Who is this person? Because there's a 5-page photo spread of him or her, and they'll explain it to you. So
yeah. And as you said, and being curious and also understanding why is this person so important?
Yeah.
Because even if you don't like, let's say you don't like Michel Sardou, for example.
Yeah.
I don't mind whether you like him or not. This is not the point. The question is, why is he so famous?
Yeah, exactly.
So the answer is he's been a singer for a long time. He sung about different things. There's a few songs that will come up at all the French weddings.
Yeah, like Connemara.
Yeah, if you don't know
Connemara, then you will miss out on French wedding traditions.
Yeah, even I was thinking with my brother about doing a playlist of wedding songs.
Yeah.
So you're ready for...
So Claude François.
They're all old. All the singers words are dead, most of them. And it's all sung from the French popular culture. But this is part of the culture. So whether you like it or not, as Christina said, at least you know what's going on.
Yeah.
And that makes a huge difference.
Exactly. And I actually had a friend who I think he made me a CD of like essential French pop. And it had like Salsa du Démon and Santiago and some Claude François as well. And like all these songs that are always in... like weddings particularly.
Yes, they're always the same.
And everybody knows. And yeah, that's a really great idea for a video or something. Yeah.
We should do something. I'll talk to my brother.
Yeah. So.
Well, thank you so much, Christina.
Okay, thank
it was
you.
awesome having you.
It was a pleasure.
And I hope you learned from this. We will try to put some links below the video. But be curious again, just check them out. And if you buy a magazine and you have a question, just put it in the comments and I would love to answer that. So have a good day and see you next week.
Bye.
Bye.